And the cradle. U.S. lawmakers approve resolution to uphold economic sanctions on Syria. UN experts have called on Western nations to immediately lift sanctions against Syria, highlighting the devastating impact these punitive measures have on the civilian population. The U.S. House of Representatives on 27 February approved Resolution 132, which urges the White House to remain committed to implementing unilateral economic sanctions on quake-struck Syria. In a 414-2 vote, lawmakers resolved that Washington must remain committed to the protection of the Syrian people, including by implementing the Syria Civilian Protection Act of 2019. Republican Representatives Marjorie Taylor Greene and Thomas Massie were the only ones to vote against the resolution. While neither has publicly commented on their vote, Western media has painted their objection as a refusal to mourn the victims of last month's earthquake. I'm pleased the House overwhelmingly passed H.Res. 132, which urges the administration to remain committed to protecting the Syrian people, including by implementing the Cesar Act, House Foreign Affairs Chairman Michael McCaul said, following Monday's vote, stressing his concern about the growing push by Arab states to normalize ties with Damascus. McCaul added that enforcing unilateral sanctions on Syria must include disallowing any energy deal for Lebanon that benefits the Assad regime. Lebanon's been waiting since 2021 for Washington to provide Egypt, Jordan, and Syria with sanction waivers to launch a desperately needed energy sharing plan that the U.S. Embassy in Beirut brokered. In 2019, the U.S. Congress passed the Cesar Act, which strictly prohibited states, companies, and individuals from doing business with Syrian government. This crushing sanctions package came on top of existing punitive measures imposed on Damascus since 2011. U.S.-imposed sanctions on the war-torn nation have contributed to the tragedy of the Syrians at a time when the country is in the midst of a major humanitarian crisis with the U.S. occupation and the Kurdish Autonomous Administration controlling vast areas of land rich in oil, gas, and crops in the northeast of the country, in addition to the Turkish occupation of the other regions. Late last year, the U.S. Congress approved yet another sanctions regime against Syria with the so-called Captagon Act, which constitutes an integrated plan, security, political, and economic, to penetrate more into the vicinity of Syria and encircle it and prevent access to raw materials, according to Syrian researcher Bassam Abdullah. Monday's resolution came just weeks after the House was forced to issue a temporary sanctions waiver for Syria to allow the unimpeded entry of humanitarian aid to the country. It also coincided with the U.S. occupation army's latest oil smuggling operation in northeast Syria. And from Press TV, international campaign to launch popular convoy to break Syria blockade. A pan-Arab international campaign has announced plans for launching a popular convoy to confront the long-running blockade imposed by the United States and the European Union on Syria, which is currently suffering the aftermath of a devastating earthquake that so far claimed thousands of lives and left as many destitute across the Arab country. The Arab and International Campaign to Break Siege on Syria made the announcement on Friday after a meeting headed by its general coordinator, Magdi al-Masrahi, former Secretary General of the Arab National Congress, officially reported. The conferees studied a proposal to launch an Arab popular convoy from the west of the Arab world to its east under the title The Arab Unity Convoy to Break the Embargo Imposed on Syria, similar to the Convoy of Arab Unity Maryam to break the siege on Iraq, which started at the beginning of the current century from London towards Morocco, then towards Iraq, the campaign said. According to the statement, it was agreed that the members of the committee, along with the members of the General Arab Conference, personalities and parties in solidarity with Syria, would conduct contacts in order to make the initiative a success. The disastrous earthquake hit Turkey and neighboring Syria earlier this month, killing more than 50,000 in both countries, according to the latest figures, which are updated daily. As rescue efforts continue in Syria following massive earthquakes there, calls are growing for the U.S. and its European allies to remove their sanctions, which are said to be hampering international aid efforts in the country. Syria has been a target of U.S. sanctions since 1979. Since the start of the Syrian conflict in 2011, the U.S. and its Western allies have dramatically tightened their economic sanctions and restrictions on the Arab country. The U.S. sanctions intensified with the passing of the Cesar Act in 2019, which targeted any individual and business that participated either directly or indirectly in Syria's reconstruction efforts. The restrictive measures have blocked imports of essential goods, affecting the Syrian people's access to medical equipment, food, heating, gas, electricity. The sanctions have effectively cut Syria off from the global economy, leaving it dependent on a handful of allied states like Russia and Iran. The UN says over 5 million people in Syria have been affected by the earthquake and need shelter, food, and medicine. The disaster has multiplied the suffering of Syrians who've endured years of foreign-backed war and Western sanctions that left millions dead, displaced, and impoverished. And also from Press TV, Iran urges unconditional removal of sanctions against quake-hit Syria. Iran urges immediate and unconditional removal of Western sanctions against Syria as means of helping Damascus ride out the aftermath of the hugely deadly and devastating earthquake that hit the Arab country earlier this month. The Islamic Republic's ambassador to the UN, Amir Saeed Iravani, made the remarks before a UN Security Council meeting on the situation in the Middle East on Tuesday. The temblor that hit the country in neighboring Turkey on February 6 has so far killed more than 50,000 people on both sides of the border. The disaster has exacerbated the Arab country's already dire humanitarian situation, collapsing structures and basic services and severely affecting people's ability to meet their basic needs, Iravani said. Given the severity of the situation, humanitarian assistance must be scaled up and provided in an impartial and non-discriminatory manner, free of politicization or conditionality, to ensure that the most vulnerable individuals receive the assistance they require, he added. In order to more effectively address Syria's current humanitarian crisis, the international community must focus on lifting the inhumane unilateral sanctions. Syria has been a target of United States sanctions since 1979. The U.S. and its Western allies imposed more such bans on Damascus after 2011, when the country found itself in the grip of a rampant foreign-backed militancy and terrorism. The coercive measures intensified even further with Washington's passing of the Cesar Act in 2019, which targeted any individual and business that participated either directly or indirectly in Syria's reconstruction efforts. The Iranian envoy reminded that the Western measures amounted to blatant violations of international law and the UN Charter, adding that the sanctions had made it more difficult for the Syrian people to access their needs and have constrained the ability of government institutions to deliver basic services and improve living standards. In the face of overwhelming international criticism, the U.S. moved on February 10th to issue a temporary sanctions waiver to allow earthquake relief funds to reach Syria. Iravani, however, asserted that the exemptions were not sufficient, calling them only an attempt to create the appearance of concern. Therefore, it's not enough to offer words of solidarity without taking concrete actions. We call for the immediate, complete, and unconditional lifting of these unjustified sanctions, he remarked. The ambassador also condemned the continued plundering of Syria's national resources, primarily oil and gas, a trend that American occupation forces started under former U.S. President Donald Trump at a time when the Arab nation could use every last bit of its national wealth. Iravani cited Syria's official statistics that have shown that such criminal acts had resulted in theft of more than $100 billion in Syrian national resources and wealth. Turning to the issue of ongoing efforts at returning peace to the Arab nation, he noted that Iran would continue its endeavors with the Astana format to help achieve long-term and sustainable normalization in and around Syria. Since 2017, the Kazakh capital has been hosting many rounds of talks between the Syrian government and the opposition, with Iran, Russia, and Turkey serving as the process's guarantors. In conclusion, the Iranian envoy condemned the Israeli regime's most recent attacks on Syria that targeted a residential building in a densely populated area in the capital Damascus on February 19. He denounced the offensive as a heinous attack that functions as a grave threat to regional peace and stability, saying the international community had to compel the Israeli regime to stop its repeated violations of Syria's sovereignty and territorial integrity. At least 5 people, including a soldier, were killed, and 15 others were wounded in the Israeli strikes. Many of the wounded are in a critical condition, and many residential homes in the Syrian capital and its countryside were damaged. And remember, your engagement through a like, share, and or subscribe will propel us at warp speed towards the continuation of our mission to truthfully go where no news will have been going before.